Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I'm the owner of Simplified Motion Physical Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution Physical Therapy in Connecticut and Long Island. Brian, we got a topic today that I already know you would love to share your thoughts about, and something that is buzzing the PT world, or at least, I guess, PT Twitter, PT Facebook, PT, all the social media stuff we check on our lunch breaks. And that is the topic of should PTs unionize? And this is something that I'm sure if you haven't heard about it, you probably will hear about it soon. In our audience is a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, but a lot of people are also managing companies. They're managing people, and or they are the people being managed, right? They are the frontline workers. So the things that I really want to get a few opinions on from you as someone who runs multiple clinics, right? And of course, I have history of being in a company managing multiple clinics. Is just your thoughts on if PT should unionize?
Yeah, man. I think what's so funny is as I told you in the pre-show, I'm like going through Reddit stuff now to try and catch myself up on all this because it's such insanity. Like it just how this would even happen in the first place is crazy to me. But in terms of like what like I just actually here's the best comment I just thought of. They go, or tell someone to buy a course to pay money for the board certification of your DPT. And in my head, I was like, oh, let's just start a course where we're gonna charge you $5-10 to teach you how to unionize, and then everyone will pay us a bunch of money, and then that'll be it. Right. In
Yeah.
general, it's going to go along the topic of all the silly things we're going to talk about when it comes to this process, because obviously, as a business owner, I think
Mm.
to unionize PT is really big. The big one is you're attacking the wrong people.
Yep.
Um, Ultimately, I think the biggest obvious reason, and you touched on it a little bit before, is the rising costs of healthcare, the rising costs of school for becoming a physical therapist, and then this thought process as a physical therapist of I just paid all this money on this education, and this all I'm going to get paid to do all this
Mhm.
work. Well, that doesn't really make
Yeah.
too much sense. It's an asymmetric,
So
change, and I
So the
think
pe-
good.
the people you're kind of relating to, right, is there's a few topics you brought up there. Is a the cost of so really we have very frustrated PTs, right? They're seeing too many people, they're not getting the cost of living increases that they want to in their pay, and they're saying, like most unions would, you look at the auto workers, steel workers, this is what they did, right? They said, we do some really good stuff and we're not getting paid for it. Let's get together and let's make a union so that we can say we all want more stuff, and that will have more power at the bargaining table, than just one person saying it and then maybe quitting later. So the seeds of this, right, seem to be pretty. I mean, we've all kind of been there, right? We've all known insurance reimbursement rates of this and all that. But I think you bring up a really good point, is that there is a lot of factors that come into this. And really, the business owner, at least a good portion of the private business owners, that maybe the people who just started their own company, um, may not be able to they don't have as much wiggle room as you think. And that's where I think attacking the wrong person really
Yeah,
comes in.
yeah. I actually,
And
it's
I think you
funny.
could speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is, and I think from a unionization perspective, I mean, I think the other part of it is like it's funny. I'm reading about one where apparently this happened in a hospital system somewhere in like they're saying like in Minnesota, right, or
Mhm.
Minneapolis, and like I can
Yeah.
see that working in some form of a hospital to some degree because I also don't think it's fair in the hospital system where the CEO is getting paid multiple millions of dollars,
Mhm.
and it's not trickling down to some of the other people. Like that's trickle down economics, and it's finest that isn't working for the little guy. So I
And their
get that.
reimbursement rate per patient, especially, I know
Yeah.
specifically in Ohio, but in other states is almost double what a private
Yes.
practitioner would be.
Because they have
So
more
they can't make
leverage.
yeah, they can't make the argument like, "Hey, you aren't bringing in the money."
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is an aspect of leverage, right, in that capacity,
Mhm.
and,
Yep.
I think the reason why, we can get into so many different aspects of this, and it's we're gonna try and fit this in 20-25 minutes, but the reality is when you think about lowering reimbursement rates in private practice and what we pitch to people is like, we can give people better quality of life, right? Like,
Mhm.
again, remember, I work in professional sports where, like, you talk about, like, unionizing, like, literally, these guys work 9 months straight or work multiple times, and there's people fighting to get into those jobs. Why?
Mhm.
Because it's at a pro sports level. It's cool. It's a fun job. It's awesome, right? But like they work a million hours. So a lot of it is like I think the quality of the job and the quality of the place you're going to work. So
Mhm.
like there's so many people who are like, I want to make more money because Here's a tidbit to every single physical therapist out there. No business owner, no hospital owes you any money because you spent money on your education. They just
Mhm.
don't. And like, I'm sorry. Like, I get it. As two guys who are sitting here together, who went to college together and spent a
Yep.
buttload of money, I
Mhm.
get it. I get the reasoning and the entitlement thought process of that, but no one owes you that. And so the second you can get over that, the much more happy you can
Yeah.
be. Because I
Yep.
think all of us are like, look at all the work we're doing. Now we're gonna go make money. And the reality is like that's not how life works, right? The people
Yeah.
who make money disrupt stuff, right?
Mhm.
The reason why Elon Musk is the richest man in the world is not because he went to school. Because I'll tell
Mhm.
you this, I tell people PTs this all the time. There'd be no way that Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates would be rich because they dropped out of college.
Yeah.
They dropped like imagine if you and I dropped out of school and made more money than all our PT friends, right? Like
Mhm.
and then them complaining that's well I spent all this money on my PT degree so I need you know what I mean. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with what I've done in the past. It has everything to do with the skill set that I have to leverage my ability to add more value to the world, and that is
Now,
all that making more money is.
I will say, I will push back on this point. I agree with you. I don't think the business owners themselves owe to repay loans. I mean, at least obviously there are loan repayment programs, and as if you're struggling to find people, a lot of business owners have done that. But I mean, we got to look at. I think I saw a stat somewhere where like the price of a year of PT school has gone up like 100% since we graduated, and
It's crazy.
we're only been practicing 13 years.
It's crazy.
Now, I don't know about you, but like either we were getting a slamming deal, which I don't, it's
I knew we were
25,000
getting
a year, 25,000, $30,000 a year, right? Now people are coming out 50, 60. My question is, especially with some of these programs where they literally do not see them on campus for a year because they're in someone else's clinic, where's all that money going? Right?
Yeah.
$50,000 a year, 3 years, right? 50,000 of that, they're not actually with the people. Like maybe the coordinator's doing it.
Yeah.
They're not paying the CIs, and that's a whole other conversation. But that's where I think systemically we have an issue, and where the what union-ish things we have now, our accrediting bodies can really step in. But you know, there's
Well,
$50,000 a year, and I'll even argue, do you really need to go for 7 years to be a PT?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I
you
mean, I think
know,
what you're talking about and getting the squeeze is that what's happening is PTs are paying more and more for school, and I think to
yeah,
point actually 30, 50 to 60K, like that's probably what we were even paying. Like I feel like it's now up to even more than that. Like I heard so many people 75,000 a year. So what's
Ooh,
happening is people are taking out loans, and here's a very interesting thing that I read a book on that I thought was is that by the way, college prices are going to continue to go up forever because the government keeps backing these loans. So the thing
mm,
is, like, if you want college prices to come down, the government actually shouldn't secure any of those loans anymore. Because if
yeah,
they did, guess what? Overnight, all of these things would decrease. Because if the only way that I can get out of college debt is dying, that's it.
mm.
Everything else is
It's the
like
only
there is nothing I could do.
non-bankruptable
I
one.
could yeah. So it's like it's such a securely backed loan
Hmm.
that essentially the colleges know that they're going to be guaranteed that
Yeah.
money so they can keep growing, growing, growing. Imagine if I said, Owen, I'm going to guarantee you from the
Mm.
government that you're going to get 60 to 80 patients per week forever. Right.
Yeah.
You would know that you could like take risks to hire other people. And like
Yeah.
imagine if you're like, hey, then I can keep increasing the prices. And they'd be like, yep,
Yeah.
we're going to guarantee it forever. And so you can just keep doing that. So ultimately that's the squeeze that we're feeling on the college side. On the
Hmm.
flip side, insurance companies aren't guaranteeing you anything. They're guaranteeing you squats. The problem is
Hmm.
when it comes to, in fact, if anything, they're like decreasing. We haven't actually had any decreasing in insurance rates. We just haven't had any increases. So the problem is when all these
But that's a
inflation
functional
numbers,
that's a functional one when it comes to inflation. I mean,
exactly,
if you are not raising
exactly.
3% a year, you are decreasing rates.
Exactly. So that's what I mean by decreasing reimbursement rates. It's not so much that the reimbursement rates are decreasing; they're just not going up, and they're not keeping
Mm,
pace with this inflation.
yeah.
So what's happening is in the middle, the value of your degree that is raised in price
Hmm.
is actually not as valuable to the
Yeah.
workplace. And that's
Yeah.
essentially why people aren't making as much money. And so that's just the reality of what's going to happen, what happens
Yeah.
there. So when people are like, there's just a finite amount of money. And what I've watched in this profession, particularly, is I watched new grads making far more money out of school than we did. That's
Hmm.
what's skyrocketed. What's
Yeah.
different is on the on the end where we are in our careers, people are starting to hit ceilings and they don't have
Yep.
any way to make more money. And the
Oh,
reality is, like, I can totally see that happens because the only way in a pure physical therapy model, yeah, is to just see as many patients as you possibly could. And so
yeah.
that's what
Well,
happened. If we all unionized and people were like, well, we want benefits, blah, this,
yeah.
the answer would be that to a certain degree, the hospital will negotiate this and just drive as many patients in that system as possible. And if part of that
Mhm.
was the union side of it, they would just get like, I'm looking at this hospital. Literally, people were like, "We'll just get rid of the hospital. We'll just get rid of all the staff and just hire new staff."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's what works. That's why Amazon doesn't have a union. Right? That's why they
Well,
don't.
there's a few things I thought about with this, right? So, for people who've been listening to the show, I am reason number one for what Brian. I am example number one of what Brian just said. You get capped at a certain number because the reimbursement rates are the same. Um, and you want to raise as you keep working, right? And eventually, your boss comes to you and says, "Look, unless you see more people, I can't justify paying you more," right? So then you get to a level where you're like, "Okay, well." I have to either see way more people, or do what I did and just go out in your own practice and take the value of what you have in the market that you have. Right, Phoenix is a pretty affluent market, and then for me, works out, right? But there's other areas of the country where you can't make that calculus, right? So these are the things, these are the dollars and cents things that business owners look at. And if you think back to like previous podcasts where we talk about how you can bring value to a company, um, there are a few things that business owners are willing to pay for, right? If you can bring more market share in a small market, but there's also things that we can do as private practices that honestly doctors are already doing. So one of the things Brian and I talked about in the pre-show is one of the things that we can do to increase reimbursement is to offer more cash-based services. Now the problem with that is some of those cash-based services patients really like, but we know aren't really great evidence, right? Well, look at PRP injections. Their evidence is about 50-50. They are all cash, and doctors are very comfortable telling people, I have PRP for you. It's worked for a few people, so you should do this, right? Insurance doesn't cover it, but they market the hell out of it, and people love it. So, this is where I'm thinking recovery boots, cupping, dry needling, some of these things that insurances are telling us we are not paying you for, but the market demands it. These are things that we should be charging higher prices for. And we just basically keep increasing prices until people won't pay for that if they see the benefit. These are some of the things that we look at as a business owner and say, how can I have more money to pay people, right? Um, Now there's the bad apples out there that just run mills, and that's a problem. But and but there's a lot of things on a balance sheet that if you actually really truly look at a business's balance sheet that's a private practice, not a hospital practice, it is really hard to find more money for people without just telling them to see more people. But I don't know. I guess
Yeah,
that's
no, I
that's
mean,
that's my tangent. I guess, but
no, I agree, man. I think to an I think what should be a really, if you're a like, I think did we chat about this once on one of the former podcasts, like, that we gave. And it's funny, I'm if you're somebody who thinks that you're a physical therapist and wants to make more money, I think one of the things that I would do is I would vet businesses more frequently, right? Like, I would ask people, like find out metrics of how the money works, right? Like, like you said this before, what is your rent? What do you guys kind of cash flow? Like, what's your P&L look like? Like, what is,
Mhm.
start asking and learning the business side of things and being
Yeah.
like, where can I add value into the business, right? And so,
Mhm.
again, I think one of the things that PTs actually should do is, again, if I've talked about this before. I have a physical therapist who works for me, and she asked me this question: how can we make more money? And like how do you, and I think the exact words were something along the lines of like, or deal with this BS salary. Like, what do we do, right? And again,
Yeah.
she's actually getting paid pretty decently, but we live in a very expensive area in Fairfield County, right? So I
Yeah.
totally get it. It's not $500,000 a year. So
Yeah.
one of the things I said to her is, I was like, what are things that you're passionate about? And let's talk about the angles of how we can help you make more money at it. And so she's really into getting like a kettlebell certification. And
Mhm.
what I really like about this person and where she's going with it is, she's like, I think I'd love to do like workshops with it. And I said, well, what kind of workshops? And so we started talking about like the different ways of how she could add these workshops into the kettlebell stuff and do it
Mhm.
together. And we started doing some research, and there are people that are doing kettlebell workshops all over the country that are not physical therapists, like they're strength and conditioning people, and they're
Mhm.
charging and they're making hand over fist of money in there. And I
Yeah.
said to her, I go, listen, we create this kind of process and you create a whole other revenue stream for this company. I will 100% share in that revenue with you, right? Like
Mhm.
if you you need my help to set up the business side of it, you need the space, you need, my coaching and ability from the business side of this, you need help. Like again, there's no tax ID you have to set up, there's no bank accounts, like there's a lot of help with me being involved in this,
Yeah.
right? Versus like, so to some PTs who are like, well, I don't want to do that, Owen. I don't want to start my own business. How about finding a practice that's willing to collaborate with you? And like
Hmm.
I said, like I would split this 50-50 with this person. If I help her come up with the idea and she runs the classes and she does the stuff
Yeah.
together and we market it to our people and it becomes like, a thing that's making a bunch of money, like of
Yeah.
course, like we split it. And
So,
like I'm cool with that. And like because in theory, I'm just using my knowledge and value to help her do something she loves to do. And
yeah.
guess what? If she builds a program that makes 50 grand a year and I give her $25,000, you tell me she's going anywhere else. And here's the
Yeah.
reality. If she's like, well, I want to keep all the money, it's like, yeah, but like then go find a place to go pay rent in this area and build a gym and build a spot to do
Mhm.
it. People will try and take it online, but it's going to be hard to do. Like there's logistics to this stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
you and I started a podcast and there's expenses to this, right? There's
Yeah.
it's not crazy, but there's if we want to do it up and do like big time stuff, like what the Jocko Willinicks of the world do and those kind of things, like
Mhm.
there's more and more expenses. So there's no difference to this type of stuff. So I think to kind of go through that process is think about things that you want to be able to do. And
Mhm.
this is, again, teaser for school. Like me and I are already talking about like ways to create programs where we could teach physical therapists that even don't want to start a business, or, people who are strength conditioning people that don't want to start that, how they can make more money, either consulting or something along those lines. So this is in the works for us. But I think it's again, you spend all this money on a physical therapy degree to be a good physical therapist.
Mhm.
That has a cap to it. But if you learn how to help people and disrupt certain things where you can make more money for somebody or add more value for people, you would mention stuff I love the PRP analogy. Like,
Mhm.
there's more value in a PRP injection because if you're telling me that, yeah, the research isn't great, but it's super safe, and in theory, that's why the insurance isn't going to pay for it because the research is kind of shoddy in it. But I could stick it in your rotator cuff that's partially torn, and you could avoid surgery. Guess what? That's a lot of value to a lot of people, and they'll pay
Yeah.
$1,000 for those injections,
So I have a
right?
question for you on the
Yep.
unionized stuff, right? Say you have a job posting, you need a PT, and you have a few candidates, right? And would a union be something that I mean, would you advertise for it? I know the reason I'm asking is look at electricians unions, right? First of all, PTs can't do altogether everything anyway, right? So the collective bargaining part about all this is kind of BS because I mean we don't even support the APTA, right? So you're never going to be able to go to every small private practice owner and say your only option is to hire a union. So theoretically, everyone's supposed to have an option. They could do union or they could not, right? So, like, what's some of the calculus, I guess, that you're coming into? And again, now I know I'm sure you have an HR department, so I don't want you to say like I would discriminate in hiring, but like, let's say like somebody comes in with a union, like how would that affect your business? Let's say you hire the union person. How would
Great
you
question.
have to adjust how you do this? Right?
Thank you.
How would
Thank
you
you.
how would you eject how you have to run the business if you hire
Thank
the
you
union
for
person?
reminding me about the HR component of this. I appreciate that. That was a good.
Yep.
That's a good heads up. I'll give you a great example of how I'm going to
Mhm.
draw a parallel to this.
Yeah.
Right? Is I have a physical therapist that's a new grad PT that's
Mhm.
looking to join us. We have 5 candidates for a PT
Yep.
position right now. It's awesome. We have a boatload of people. And why? Because
Because you're a
we can.
place that's awesome to work for.
Exactly. So there you go. So we really cater to people and we have a lot of people that attract to us. So it's great. It's a great problem to have, versus a lot of hospitals are understaffed. And I think that's where this unionization comes from is, overworked, underpaid healthcare workers. So totally get it. So, if you want a good place to work, come give me a call. Anyway, so
No
in terms of
staffing
that,
problem for you.
yeah, exactly. But I'll tell you an issue that happened that I think is worth kind of talking about because I think it happens in the athletic training world a little bit.
Mm,
So we have a guy who's a PTAT. We have a
yeah.
need for an athletic trainer, like
Mhm,
that's coming up. We don't necessarily have a need for physical therapy, but we're planning on the growth side of it, right?
mhm,
And so this guy's a new grad PT, but is also an athletic trainer. So he's a PTAT designation. And I like the
yeah.
guy. I think he's a great. I think he'd be a solid PT AT. I think he'd be good for us. But one of the things that definitely happened was when he talked about it, we were like, I talked about this dual role, like maybe you could do stuff that's PT and AT. And yeah, he'd probably be making more money, but I was like, I can pay you more money because in theory, I know that I have this contract in place where I need help and I need to put you in there. So like in theory, he'd be making more money. And kind of going back to what we talked about is there's cash based services. Like, 50% of our business is cash pay. And
Mhm.
so I said to him, I go, and he was not into it. He's like, listen, I'm not really I want to get out of the training room. I just want to be
Mhm.
a PT. And I said to him, I go, listen, that's fine. I get that. But realize that, and I'm just gonna be fully transparent with you
Mhm.
and how this works. If you don't want to do any AT work, then having a PT AT background just makes you a new grad PT again. So like
Yeah.
the reality is like you go right back in the whereas I had 5 candidates if I'm evaluating them and
Yeah.
he's my PT AT, he's actually my first choice.
Yeah.
But as soon as he says I don't really want to do this part of the job,
Yeah.
right, kind of going back to your unionizing thing, like
Yeah.
it's just a thing on their resume now. So
Yeah.
it becomes part of the interview. So for
Yeah.
him now, actually with that, we like him and we want to
Yeah.
chat with him. And if he's listening to this podcast, we do like you. But it's one of those things where and I talked to him, I was like,
Yeah.
it's at the same time, like now we're evaluating the other candidates a little more, right? Whereas
Yeah.
like he had the opportunity to steal it's just no different than pro athletics, right? Like if
Well, and
someone's
you're
like, I
hiring
don't
for a different
yeah,
position in that case, and you're just
yeah,
prioritizing that position
yeah.
if he wants that. Yeah.
But I would say with a unionization perspective, like if every single PT on the planet, to your point about lobbying, is like, I want to be part of the union, like that's how the leverage works on the
Yeah.
business owner side, where it's like, all right, like we have no choice, we got to play ball with this,
Yeah.
right? But if there's one person, so to all those PTs out there that want to unionize, if there's a bunch of people that don't want to do it, in
Mhm.
theory, you're going to handcuff yourself probably
Yeah.
because you're
Well,
you're you're creating this process. And again, I'm not speculating for me. I
well,
don't know because I've
so
never had this
I'll
happen.
say that I'll save you
Yeah,
here. I'll say this because I don't have employees. I don't have an HR
yeah,
department. What will happen is there's going to be people who cross the picket line, right?
yes,
Because there's going to be owners who say, if you're not a union, I'm going to pay you more, right?
yeah,
And they're going to say, ooh, I'm going to advertise at all these things that aren't the union jobs, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, he got more, and we're fighting for a small sliver. I mean, what's the average salary is between 70,000 like 110,000, right? Depending on experience. As a staff PT, if you don't own anything, no equity, none of that stuff. So that's not a big number that people will really say, well, I have to be Joe Union. I have to fight for the man, right? And this is what happened. Look at the auto workers, look at the steel workers, look at everybody. They broke it, right? Because they use the market incentive, right? And what will happen is you will have these companies saying, I cannot make money without it, right? So the only place I see this working is maybe a huge hospital system,
yeah,
right? And everybody in the area knows like we are getting together so we can collectively bargain this. But even then, I mean, it's their hospital system employs maybe like 30% of the
yeah,
PTs in my area. So there's 70% of people that wouldn't be in that. And then all they need to do is switch for a job for a higher pay. Right. So
exactly.
you're going to get the people who really care about being acute care PTs. They're going to be the ones, well, I could care a lot about it if it pays me 50% more than my job taking insurance.
Yeah,
So these are the market incentives that kind of come into play with here. So yeah, it's a great idea, right? I would love to have more money for less patients. That
yeah,
would be fantastic. And I full heartedly agree that the biggest issues are you got more to pay for work, more to pay for school, right? So these people are getting squeezed, cost of living's going up, and we're not, and essentially reimbursement rates are going down, right?
yeah,
So those are the two boogeymen, right? Because you can't fix the economy going up with inflation, right? So if we want to get together against the colleges, get together against the insurance companies. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we could make PT the loss leader of a hospital. We could be the Costco hot dog, where it doesn't really matter if we make money or not because people really love their PTs, and then
yeah.
we get them into the hospital for some MRIs for useless stuff. I don't know, but
I think kind of segueing into like what we think the future of this all looks like for
yeah.
particularly for private
By
practice
the way,
PT.
Brian does not agree or disagree with that. Thank you,
No, 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 exactly.
Brian.
Listen, I think it's an interesting conversation to have. While
Mhm,
as a business owner, I think the idea of unionization is kind of dumb. If you haven't got me, that I think again, you're kind of going in the wrong direction with this.
mhm,
Versus, I think what that is it's not taking accountability for what you can do to fix your situation. You're
mhm.
looking at an idealistic thing that you want to go get, but in
Yeah.
reality, it's actually going to be way easier just to like fix yourself and make yourself more valuable. So like
Mhm,
what I think in the future of PT practice and how we can make more money, is by creating more cash-based services, so that way
Mhm.
then we're not. And I remember this so hard how, like, when I first started my cash-based practice. Now obviously we take insurance and whatnot, but
Yeah.
when I first started, I remember one PT said to me, "But you got to be really good for that." And I was like, "I'm really flipping good." And I didn't say flipping. I was like, "I'm really good at this." And so the reality is being confident in yourself and like
Mhm.
saying like, "I can do more. I can create more cash based services. And if I don't know how to do that, I'm going to learn and like get
Yeah.
better at it and get mentors and find that." Like
Yeah.
the future of PT is going to be on how to continue to add more value. So I mean, like, dude, I think what's so great is that PTs sometimes compartmentalize, like it's only happening to us. Woe is
Mhm.
me. And then you just like it's happening to orthopedic surgeons, it's happening to nurses, it's happening
Yeah.
all over the place. I love the
Yeah.
PRP analogy because there's so many people. I'm going to steal that and talk to my employees about it because if anybody even gives us a hint of like, look at PRP injections, like they're selling those and like, well, they may have some medical stuff, like so should cupping, right? So could I love the recovery boots idea. Like we do fitness stuff. Like there's so many other cash based services that physical therapists can get into. So good having more skills will always help that. It's just a matter of how to create that process so that you can keep getting better, right? And if you're
Yeah.
innovating and getting smarter and learning how to create more leverage, you will end up making more money. And it's not for the reason you think, which is being a
Yeah.
better physical therapist.
Well, and the good thing is, I mean, to end on this point, we got to market our services are valuable. I had a lady give me my full price, 150 bucks. She was sick that day. And I said, "Oh, it's okay. We can reschedule later." She's like, "No, no, no. I want to pay you 150 bucks. This is like a mom with one on the way. They're not, billionaires at all." And they're like, "No, no, no. Like what you've done for me is fantastic. Absolutely. Here's your money." Right. So I think the silver lining on this is the market really sees what we do. We just have to figure out how to make it so that the PTs get the pay.
Totally. And I think that's the reality of the difference, right? Like
Mhm.
honestly, the ironic part of all this, like when you think about these hospital systems or like physician-owned clinics that pay you more in the beginning, they'll never market you. They have no interest in making you better because if they make
Mhm.
you better, in theory they got to pay you more. So they're like I would think about investing into a company, even if you got to take a pay cut to start there,
Mhm.
that's going to help you grow yourself and help you
Mhm.
learn more skill sets yourself. Like wouldn't that make more logical? Take the short-term hit to make the long-term gain,
Yeah.
right? It's the marshmallow experiment. Get 2 marshmallows later versus the one now.
Yeah. And with that, we will finish up. I know that obviously there's going to be probably about 7 different PT podcasts talking about this, but we wanted to add our 2 cents, especially from uh, the uh, the the entrepreneurial side. So, with that, Brian, have a good day, my man.
You too, man. Good
All
stuff.
right. See
All
ya.
right. See ya.